Okay, this is our demo of our FlexLayout module, ObservableMedia, which is basically a JavaScript API used to detect device viewport changes, let's say. We talked about in the lecture, ObservableMedia is a wrapper around an observable, but the main goal of the usage of the service is really to detect different viewport sizes. So right now we have a couple of buttons inside this green area. Okay, so let's back up a minute. The blue area is the root component of the Angular application, and I painted it sky blue, and inside of that I have a div tag which is green, and it has buttons inside of it. And so as a matter of fact, it has a couple of buttons. One of them might be hidden right now. So let's change the size of the viewport. So as you could see, that when I change the size of the viewport, another button appears. Okay, and it changes the view. So basically, notice we're in desktop content. Now we're seeing the medium content. So the application detected, got an event which basically said, oh, now you're looking at medium content. And so based on that, I loaded the medium content into the component. I could have easily just done this inside of a template, but it's really just calling a load function inside the component and defining the content of the component instance to be medium content, which is getting rendered on the screen. So, and the goal was to show you that as I changed the size, now we're looking at small content, and for small content at that breakpoint, I could basically show more buttons, hide more buttons, do whatever I want. But what I'm showing you is programmatically, I'm getting events which show me the changes in the breakpoints. So notice now I'm going to go to mobile content. I got some wrapping there in the text, that's why that shifted. But now going to the small mobile content, I changed the column orientation, and I also have a different gap size, and also it shows mobile content because that breakpoint actually called the load mobile content function and changed the value of the content inside my object instance to say mobile content. And then what I also do is I added another div tag in the template which only renders when the mobile content is detected, and I just put this text in it as this text the result of using is active on the mobile media query alias in the template, and only shown in the mobile viewport sizes. So in this example I'm using the template. In this example I'm using the object instance. So now that you know a little bit about what the demo does, let's go and look at the code. Okay, let me go into presentation mode. Okay, let's see what's happening. Alt 1. Okay, I don't know why that was having trouble doing that. So let's look at the application, and we're just going to focus on the component right now. So basically, the component, what it does is it basically uses the FlexLayout module with the media change in the observable media. I also use a subscription from RxJS, and in my app component, I have a title called ObservableMedia Demo, and I have these strings. One of them is the content. The string content basically is the thing I'm changing as I go through the breakpoints, and that's the thing that's getting rendered in the template using the interpolation operator. And basically, if you look at the constructor, I basically have injected an observable media into my object instance. And then what I do is I subscribe to the media changes. And when I get these media changes, what I do is I calculate the media query alias, and I say, well, if it's a XS, then I do a load mobile content. If it's an LG, I do invisible equals true. If I load desktop content. If it's a small device, I load small content. If it's a medium device, I load medium content. Now, the one thing I skipped over here is that looking at my media changes, I have this backtick operator here. Well, it's just a backtick. It allows you to show a dynamic string, and basically inside of that I have these $ left parens, which can only be used inside the backtick, and those evaluate the real-time value of the change.mq alias or update it. In this case, this whole line, what it's doing is when there is a change, and basically the media query, I could access the media query with the change, and what I do is I look up in the registry for the MQ alias, and basically I define my change.mq alias, and so it's really injecting the MQ alias into the media change object, and that only happens if it is a predefined breakpoint. If it's a custom breakpoint, then basically what I do is I set an empty string. So that line is pretty much typical. And I have these functions: invisible on desktop, return invisible, invisible on desktop, return invisible. So on large screens, invisible is true, and so I hide something using that dynamic attribute. And on load mobile content, I say loading mobile content, and I put the content attribute and I set it to mobile content. And in load desktop content, what I do is I basically set the content to desktop content, but also I return this dot invisible, which is true. So let's take a look, and of course I load the medium content and the small content the same way. Now let me look at the template just to show you a little bit about what's going on here. In the template, I do have a container. I have this container X, which just basically sets my fonts and makes sure that the layout for the container X has an auto height, and well, it has a height and certain fonts, etc. And then what I do is I have this div which has a flex layout, and I put a space around any of the flex items inside this flex layout. I have a flex layout gap is 2 pixels. When it's mobile, make it 4 pixels. And when it's mobile, do a column orientation here. So so these are the flex items, and they get managed by the flex container. And the only thing I'm doing here with this responsive directive is basically saying, okay, if it's invisible on desktop as true, then hide it. Hide this button. So the reset button should be hidden for large desktops. Once again, my content's dynamically changing with my media, my observable media notifications. I change this content, and my interpolation directive renders that content. So the content is the attribute in the component instance whose value is dynamically changing using using the media query notifications, and since Angular supports a change detection and dynamic binding, the interpolation operator is going to bind that content to my front end. Now, this particular content down here, once again, shows up with the div style over here. I didn't add this particular class, but we can do that right now. But basically, the ng if does a media that is active. That is, if the mobile media query is active, then we show this text. So now let's go and see if we should add that add content style. Let's see if I just add that. And let's just do a background and make it, let's just make it peach puff. So now let's see what our view is looking like here. Okay, so now let's, so notice I have a desktop content, my button is hidden, and my div tag isn't showing up as peach puff yet. I'll go revisit that, but sometimes there's caching in the server. But the bottom line is the reset button is showed for smaller content, for medium content, and then for desktop it gets hidden. And notice I spelled add wrong. And notice in my template I put a space around. If I put a space between, it would have laid out a little differently. Notice that the buttons are left and right justified, but they're still laid out like flex items. And this still didn't change color. So let's try to figure out why, and most likely it has to do with the transpiler, and I might have to restart the app. Okay. Well, that worked. So that is really all I wanted to show you.